Ellis Whitmore never imagined the night that promised her future would be the one to destroy it. Behind a closed door at a grand ball, she discovered a betrayal so devastating it shattered everything she believed about love and family. Her own sister, in the arms of her fiancé, their whispered confessions revealing a calculated deception. She fled into the November darkness without a word, her silence more powerful than any confrontation. But across the ballroom, a duke had been watching. And in her quiet devastation, he saw something that would change both their lives forever. A strength worth pursuing, a heart worth winning. The chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom of Hartwick Manor, their crystals refracting into 1,000 tiny stars that danced across silk gowns and polished floors. Ellis Whitmore stood near the entrance, her dove-grey dress modest compared to the vibrant colors swirling around her. Yet she felt beautiful tonight, hopeful. The weight that had pressed on her shoulders for months seemed lighter, almost bearable. Her engagement to Thomas Pemberton had been announced 3 weeks ago, and though it had been arranged more for practical reasons than romantic ones, Ellis had convinced herself that affection could grow. Her family needed this alliance. Her father's poor investments had left them teetering on the edge of social obscurity, and Thomas, with his comfortable fortune and respectable lineage, represented stability. She smoothed the fabric of her gloves and scanned the crowd for her younger sister, Clara. The girl had disappeared nearly 20 minutes ago, claiming she needed air. Ellis knew she should simply let her be, but concern tugged at her. Clara had been acting strangely all evening, her usual vivacity replaced by nervous energy and averted eyes. The music swelled as couples swept past in elegant waltzes. Ellis moved through the crowd, nodding politely at acquaintances, her search growing more determined. She checked the conservatory, the library, the morning room, each space empty or occupied by guests who had not seen Clara. Then she noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of a dimly lit corridor, away from the main festivities. Light spilled through the gap, warm and inviting. Perhaps Clara had sought refuge there. Ellis approached quietly, her silk slippers making barely a sound on the marble floor. She reached for the door handle, beginning to push it open wider when she heard it. A laugh, low and intimate, unmistakably Clara's, and then a man's voice, rough with emotion. "Thomas." Ellis froze, her hand still on the door. Her mind struggled to make sense of what she was hearing, rejecting the obvious conclusion, even as her eyes confirmed it. Through the widening gap, she saw them. Thomas had Clara pressed against the wall, his hands tangled in her auburn hair, so different from Ellis's own dark locks. Clara's arms were wrapped around his neck, her body arched into his with a familiarity that spoke of repetition, of practice, of time spent in secret. They were kissing with desperate urgency, completely unaware of their audience. Thomas pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against Clara's. His words carried across the room, each one a knife twisting in Elis's chest. "I cannot wait much longer, Clara. This charade with your sister is killing me." Clara's fingers traced his jaw, her voice soft but clear. "Soon, Thomas. Once the wedding is done, once her dowry is secured, we can be together properly. Father will have no choice but to accept it then. You are the one I want, the one I have always wanted. Your sister is pleasant enough, but she is nothing compared to you." Ellis felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The words echoed in her mind, refusing to settle into coherent meaning. Her sister, her fiancé, a plot, a betrayal so complete, it defied comprehension. She watched as Thomas captured Clara's lips again, watched as her sister responded with enthusiasm, watched as they moved together in a way that confirmed this was no impulsive mistake, but a carefully maintained deception. Time seemed to stop and stretch simultaneously. Ellis knew she should move, should speak, should scream, but no sound came. Her throat had closed around words too terrible to voice. Her body had become a statue, frozen in the doorway of her own destruction. Then survival instinct took over. Without a sound, without betraying her presence, Ellie stepped backward. 1 step, 2, 3. She pulled the door back to its original position, leaving it slightly ajar as she had found it. Her hands shook violently as she turned away. Her vision blurred at the edges, narrowing to a tunnel that led only forward, only away. She moved through the corridor like a ghost, her feet finding their way without conscious direction. The sounds of the ball grew louder as she emerged back into the main house. The music that had seemed so lovely an hour ago now grated against her ears like shattered glass. Laughter felt like mockery. Every smiling face a reminder of her own foolishness. She had believed in this engagement. She had trusted her sister. She had thought herself part of a family that, despite its flaws and financial struggles, remained united. All of it a lie. Ellis found herself in the entrance hall, though she had no memory of walking there. A footman approached, concern crossing his features. "Are you well, miss? Shall I fetch someone?" She forced her face into something resembling composure. "I need my cloak. I am leaving. But Miss Whitmore, your family, your fiancé, please, just my cloak." The young man hesitated, clearly uncertain, but something in her expression must have convinced him. He retrieved her heavy wool cloak and draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it felt like the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and unstable. "Shall I call for your carriage?" "No, I will walk." "Miss, it is quite cold, and the hour grows late." "I will walk." Ellis stepped out into the November night before he could protest further. The cold air hit her face like a slap, sharp and clarifying. She welcomed it, welcomed anything that might drown out the scene playing endlessly in her mind. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she made her way down the long drive. Behind her, Hartwick Manor blazed with light and life, a celebration she no longer belonged to. Ahead, darkness stretched toward an uncertain future. She did not know where she was going. She knew only that she could not stay, could not face them, could not pretend she had not seen what she had seen. The betrayal of Thomas, painful as it was, felt almost secondary. She had never loved him, not truly. She had accepted him out of duty, out of necessity. But Clara, her sister, her blood. That wound cut deeper than any other possibly could. It was not just the betrayal itself, but the calculation behind it, the planning, the cold-blooded manipulation of using Elise as a means to an end, a stepping stone to what Clara truly wanted. Had her sister ever loved her? Or had Ellis simply been convenient, useful, disposable? The questions circled like vultures, offering no answers, only more pain. Ellis pulled her cloak tighter and kept walking into the night, leaving behind everything she thought she knew about love, family, and her place in the world. She did not look back. She could not afford to. The walk to her aunt's home took nearly 2 hours through the cold November night. Ellis's feet ached in her thin dancing slippers. Her cloak offered little protection against the bitter wind, but she welcomed the physical discomfort. It gave her something tangible to focus on, something other than the images that kept replaying behind her closed eyelids. When she finally reached the modest townhouse on Willow Street, dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of grey. Her Aunt Margaret, a widow of 15 years and her father's eldest sister, opened the door in her dressing gown, shock evident on her lined face. "Ellis. Good heavens, child. What has happened?" The concern in her aunt's voice nearly broke her. Ellis had held herself together through the entire walk, her composure locked in place like armor. But here, in the safety of the only person she truly trusted, that armor began to crack. "May I come in, Aunt Margaret?" Her aunt stepped aside immediately, ushering her into the warmth of the entrance hall. A maid appeared, summoned by the commotion, and Margaret quickly instructed her to prepare the guest room and bring hot tea. Once they were seated in the small parlor, a fire crackling in the hearth and cups of strong tea warming their hands, Elise finally spoke. She told her aunt everything. The words came slowly at first, then faster, tumbling over each other in their urgency to be released. Margaret listened without interruption, her face growing progressively more grim. When Ellis finished, her aunt set down her teacup with deliberate care. "Your father must be informed immediately. The engagement must be dissolved." Ellis nodded, exhaustion settling into her bones. "I cannot marry him, Aunt Margaret. I cannot even look at him. Or Clara. I do not know if I ever can again." "That is entirely understandable, my dear. What they have done is unconscionable." Her aunt paused, her expression troubled. "But you must prepare yourself. Society will not be kind. They never are to the woman in these situations, regardless of fault. The words proved prophetic. Within 3 days, the engagement was formally broken. Ellis's father had arrived at Margaret's house the morning after her flight, his face pale with fury and shame. He had confronted Thomas, who had offered no denials, only excuses. Clara had wept and begged forgiveness, claiming she had been overcome by passion she could not control. Their father had been forced to choose between his daughters, and in the end, practicality won. Clara, younger and more vivacious, had better prospects for salvaging a decent marriage. Ellis, already considered plain by society's harsh standards and now tainted by scandal, would simply have to weather the storm quietly. The injustice of it burned in Ellis's chest, but she said nothing. What was there to say? The world had always been constructed this way, favoring beauty over substance, youth over wisdom, charm over character. The rumors began almost immediately. Ellis heard them through her aunt's servants, through the whispers in church, through the carefully worded letters from former friends. She must have been cold, they said, unaffectionate. No wonder he sought warmth elsewhere. Perhaps she discovered some defect in him and broke it off herself, too proud to admit it. I heard she had a terrible temper, drove the poor man away with her moods. The truth, as always, was irrelevant. Society needed a narrative that made sense within their understanding of the world, and that narrative always placed blame on the woman who had been wronged. Ellis stopped going out. She spent her days in her aunt's library, losing herself in books in worlds where justice existed and love conquered all. At night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever feel whole again. Margaret worried. Ellis could see it in the way her aunt watched her during meals, in the gentle suggestions that perhaps a walk in the park would do her good, in the careful mention of upcoming social events. But Ellis could not face them. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. 3 weeks after the broken engagement, a letter arrived. Ellis recognized the handwriting immediately, Clara's elaborate script, all loops and flourishes. Her first instinct was to throw it into the fire unread. But curiosity, that persistent human weakness, made her break the seal. Dearest Ellis, I know you cannot forgive me. I do not expect you to, but I need you to understand that what happened between Thomas and me was not planned. It simply happened. We tried to resist, but love is not something that can be controlled or reasoned with. I am sorry for the pain this has caused you. I am sorry for the scandal. But I cannot be sorry for loving him. Surely you, of all people, can understand that the heart wants what it wants. Father has forbidden me from seeing Thomas until the scandal subsides. It is torture, Ellis. I hope you never know such pain. I remain your loving sister. Clara Ellis read the letter twice, then carefully tore it into small pieces and fed them to the fire. The audacity of it left her breathless. Clara's self-pity, her complete inability to comprehend the depth of her betrayal, her assumption that Ellis would sympathize with her suffering. I hope you never know such pain. The words would have been laughable if they were not so infuriating. That afternoon, Margaret convinced Ellis to accompany her to a small charity event at the parish church. It would be mostly older women, she assured her niece, and very low-key. No one who would dare speak unkindly to her face. Ellis agreed reluctantly. She could not hide forever as much as she might wish to. The event was as Margaret had described, quiet, respectable, and mercifully free of her former social circle. Ellis helped arrange flowers for the altar, grateful for the simple, mindless task. She was carrying a vase of white roses toward the sanctuary when she felt it, that peculiar sensation of being watched. She turned slowly, scanning the small gathering of women chatting near the entrance, but it was not one of them watching her. Standing in the doorway, partially shadowed by the afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in impeccable dark clothing that spoke of wealth and position. His face was striking, strong jaw, high cheekbones, dark hair that fell just slightly across his forehead. But it was his eyes that held her, grey as storm clouds, intense and unwavering, fixed on her with an expression she could not quite decipher. She knew who he was. Everyone in England knew who he was. Anthony Ashford, the Duke of Thornhill. The most eligible bachelor in the country, perhaps in all of Europe, a man so far above her social station that they might as well inhabit different worlds. Why was he looking at her? Their eyes met for a long moment. Elise felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt her heart begin to race in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with something far more dangerous. Then Margaret touched her arm, breaking the spell. "Ellis, dear, those roses need water." When Ellis looked back toward the doorway, the Duke was gone. She wondered if she had imagined him, conjured him from too many novels and too much solitude. But the feeling of his gaze remained, burning on her skin like a brand she could not see but could not ignore. That night, for the first time since her world had shattered, Ellis did not dream of betrayal. She dreamed of storm-grey eyes. Anthony Ashford had not intended to attend the charity event at the parish church. Such gatherings were typically beneath the notice of a duke, filled with local gentry and minor aristocracy, seeking to improve their standing through public displays of virtue. But his mother had asked, and despite his reputation for coldness, he rarely denied her anything. He had arrived late, planning to make a brief appearance before returning to his far more pressing matters: the shipping contracts awaiting his signature, the parliamentary debate he needed to prepare for, the endless stream of invitations from ambitious mothers with marriageable daughters. Then he had seen her, the young woman carrying white roses, her dark hair pulled back simply, her dress modest and unadorned. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance by society's standards. She was not a beauty in the classical sense, not the type to draw immediate attention in a crowded ballroom. But something about her arrested him completely. Perhaps it was the way she moved, with careful deliberation, as though each step required conscious thought, or the set of her shoulders, held back with rigid determination despite the weariness evident in her posture. Or perhaps it was simply the expression on her face when she thought no one was watching, a combination of pain and strength that spoke of recent wounds borne with dignity. He had watched her for several minutes before she felt his gaze and turned. When their eyes met, he had felt something shift in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation, uncomfortable and compelling in equal measure. Anthony had left quickly, disturbed by his own reaction. He prided himself on control, on reason, on the ability to remain unmoved by sentiment. Emotional entanglements led to poor decisions. He had seen it countless times in his peers, men who gambled fortunes, fought duels, destroyed their reputations, all for the sake of some ephemeral passion. He would not be one of them. But that night he had found himself asking his mother about the young woman with the dark hair and haunted eyes. Oh, that poor girl. His mother had sighed, settling into her favorite chair by the fire. That is Ellis Whitmore. You have not heard the scandal? Anthony rarely paid attention to gossip, but his mother proceeded to tell him the story anyway. The broken engagement, the sister's betrayal, the whispers and rumors that painted Ellis as cold, difficult, somehow at fault for her fiancé's defection. Ridiculous, his mother had concluded. Anyone with eyes can see the girl is suffering. But society must have its scapegoat, and it is always easier to blame the victim than the villain. Anthony had said nothing, but his mind had returned again and again to that moment in the church, to the way she had looked at him, startled, vulnerable, but not simpering, not calculating, not assessing his worth or angling for advantage, just looking, simply existing in a moment of unexpected connection. 3 days later, he attended a small musical evening at the home of Lord and Lady Ashworth. It was the sort of tedious affair he normally avoided, but something, he refused to call it hope, had prompted him to accept the invitation. She was there. Ellis sat in the third row, partially hidden behind a particularly robust matron in an elaborate feathered hat. Her aunt, he assumed, sat beside her, occasionally patting her niece's hand with concerned affection. Ellis's attention appeared fixed on the pianist, but Anthony noticed the way her fingers twisted the fabric of her gloves, the tension in her jaw. She did not want to be here. She was forcing herself to endure it. The realization intrigued him more than it should have. When the performance ended and the guests mingled over tea and small cakes, Anthony found himself navigating the room with deliberate casualty, angling closer to where Ellie stood with her aunt near the windows. He heard fragments of conversation as he approached. "Elise, dear, do try to smile. You look as though you are attending a funeral." The aunt's voice was gentle but insistent. "I am trying, Aunt Margaret. I know this is difficult, but you must show them you are unaffected." "That you have moved past it. Have I, though?" Ellis's voice was barely a whisper. "Have I moved past watching my sister kiss my fiancé? Past hearing them plot to use me?" Her aunt squeezed her hand. "You will, in time. But first, you must be seen. You must remind society that you are more than the scandal they have made you." Anthony chose that moment to approach. He saw Ellis stiffen, saw recognition flash in her eyes. "Lady Margaret." He bowed to the aunt first, observing proper protocol. "I do not believe we have been formally introduced, but my mother speaks highly of your charitable work." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "Your Grace." "This is indeed an honor." She turned to her niece. "May I present my niece, Miss Ellis Whitmore?" Ellis curtsied, her movements precise and correct. "Your Grace." Anthony held her gaze. "Miss Whitmore, I trust you are enjoying the evening." "It has been pleasant, Your Grace." The music was particularly well performed. Her voice was steady, but he could see the questions in her eyes. Why was he speaking to her? What did he want? Everyone wanted something from a duke. "I confess I find these gatherings rather tedious." He surprised himself with his honesty. The same people, the same conversations, the same transparent maneuvering. It becomes exhausting. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed her face. "Then why attend at all, Your Grace? Surely a man of your position can decline invitations without consequence. Social obligation, duty, the burden of title." He paused, then added with deliberate weight, "Though I find that some evenings prove more worthwhile than others." The implication hung in the air between them. Her aunt noticed it too, her eyebrows rising nearly to her hairline. Before anyone could respond, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Ellis, is that truly you?" Anthony turned to see a young woman approaching, beautiful in the conventional sense. Auburn hair, blue eyes, a figure that drew appreciative glances from every man in the room. But there was something brittle in her smile, something false in her apparent delight. "Clara," Ellis said, her voice suddenly lifeless, "I did not realize you would be here." "Of course I am here. I could not miss Lady Ashworth's musical evening." Clara turned her attention to Anthony, her smile widening. "Your Grace, what a pleasure. I am Miss Clara Whitmore, Ellis's sister." The sister. The one who had kissed her sister's fiancé, who had plotted and schemed and felt no remorse. Anthony's expression did not change, but his tone cooled by several degrees. "Miss Clara." Clara either did not notice or did not care. She looped her arm through Ellis's with false, sisterly affection. "Ellis, we simply must talk. I have so much to tell you. Father is considering allowing Thomas to call on me properly, now that sufficient time has passed." "Sufficient time?" Margaret's voice was sharp. "It has been less than a month." Clara waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, you are always so concerned with appearances. What matters is that Thomas and I are finally free to acknowledge our true feelings. Is that not wonderful, Ellis?" Anthony watched Ellis's face carefully. He saw the moment she shut down, saw her retreat behind walls so high and thick that nothing could penetrate them. "I am happy for you, Clara." Ellis's voice was perfectly modulated, perfectly empty. "If you will excuse me, I find I have a headache. Aunt Margaret, I believe I will call for our carriage." "Of course, dear." Margaret shot Clara a look of pure venom before turning back to Anthony. "Your Grace, thank you for your kind attention." Anthony bowed. "The pleasure was entirely mine." As Ellis turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice low enough that only she would hear. "Miss Whitmore." She paused, looking back at him with those dark, wounded eyes. "I hope we might speak again soon, under better circumstances." For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. "That would be pleasant, Your Grace." Then she was gone, her aunt hurrying after her, leaving Anthony alone with the insufferable Clara, who was already trying to engage him in conversation. He excused himself within 30 seconds. That night, in his study with a glass of brandy, Anthony considered his options. He was the Duke of Thornhill. He could have any woman in England. Women far more beautiful, far more accomplished, far less complicated than Ellis Whitmore. But when he closed his eyes, he did not see their faces. He saw only her, carrying white roses, bearing her pain with quiet strength, looking at him as though he might be something other than a title and a fortune. It was foolish, it was reckless, it was inevitable. The autumn sunlight filtered through the trees of Hyde Park, casting dappled shadows on the walking path. Ellis had not wanted to come, but Aunt Margaret had insisted. Fresh air and exercise would do her good, she had said. The world would not stop simply because Ellis wished to hide from it. So here she was, walking slowly along the less traveled paths, her aunt chatting amiably beside her about inconsequential things. The weather, the new draper's shop on Bond Street, the upcoming harvest festival at the church. Ellis listened with half her attention, the other half caught in the endless loop of thoughts that had consumed her since the musical evening 3 days ago. Clara's casual cruelty, the pitying looks from other guests, and beneath it all, like a persistent melody she could not quite forget, the memory of storm-grey eyes and a voice that had promised better circumstances. Why had the Duke spoken to her? Men of his rank did not acknowledge disgraced women without reason. Perhaps he pitied her, or perhaps more cynically, he saw an opportunity, a woman desperate enough to accept attentions that would otherwise be inappropriate. The thought made her stomach turn. Miss Whitmore. The voice came from behind her, deep, familiar, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. She turned to find Anthony Ashford dismounting from a magnificent black horse, handing the reins to a groom who had materialized as if from nowhere. He was dressed for riding in dark trousers and a perfectly tailored coat, his hair slightly windswept in a way that should have looked disheveled, but instead looked unfairly attractive. "Your Grace." She curtsied automatically, aware of her aunt's sharp intake of breath beside her. "I hope I'm not intruding." He approached with measured steps, his gaze fixed on Ellis with that same unsettling intensity she remembered. "I often ride here in the mornings." It was afternoon, actually, but Ellis did not correct him. "As do we, Your Grace, or rather we walk, a preferable pace for conversation, I would think." He glanced at Margaret. "Lady Margaret, would you permit me to walk with you both for a time?" Margaret looked as though she might faint from shock or delight or both. "Of course, Your Grace. We would be honored." They began to walk, Anthony falling into step beside Ellis. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, comfortable on Anthony's part, increasingly anxious on Ellis's. Finally, he broke it. "I trust you have recovered from your headache the other evening?" She glanced at him, trying to gauge whether he was mocking her obvious excuse to leave. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he understood exactly why she had fled. "I have, thank you, though I confess the company was more affliction than the headache itself." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I can imagine. Your sister seems quite determined to ensure everyone knows of her happiness." Ellis felt heat rise to her cheeks, shame and anger mixing together. She should not be discussing this with him. She should not be discussing this with anyone. "You must think my family terribly dramatic, Your Grace. I think your family has treated you abominably." His bluntness startled her, "and I think society's response has been predictably unjust." She stopped walking, forcing him to stop as well. Margaret, reading some unspoken cue, suddenly discovered a fascinating flower bed several yards away that required immediate inspection. "Why are you speaking to me?" Ellis kept her voice low but firm. "Men of your rank do not acknowledge women like me without purpose. If you pity me, I assure you it is unnecessary. If you have other intentions, I would prefer you state them plainly." Anthony studied her for a long moment. The sunlight caught the grey of his eyes, turning them almost silver. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried absolute conviction. "I speak to you because I find you interesting. Because I watched you carry white roses with such careful dignity that it made something in my chest ache. Because when your sister tried to wound you, you did not strike back. You simply removed yourself. Because you are nothing like the women who throw themselves at me at every social gathering, and that intrigues me more than I care to admit." Ellis felt her breath catch. She had expected many things: pity, condescension, perhaps even improper suggestions, but not this raw honesty. "I am not looking for romance, Your Grace. I do not trust easily anymore. Perhaps I never will again. I am not asking you to trust me. Not yet." He took a small step closer, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and leather. "I am asking only that you allow me to speak with you, to know you, no expectations, no obligations. And what do you get from this arrangement? The pleasure of your company, the satisfaction of seeing you treated as you deserve to be treated rather than as society has decided you should be treated." His voice dropped lower. "And perhaps, if I am fortunate, the chance to see you smile. Genuinely smile, not the brittle thing you offer in public." She should refuse. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was dangerous, that allowing a man like him into her life in any capacity was asking for pain. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her want to believe him. "One walk," she said finally, "one conversation. That is all I can promise. That is all I ask." They resumed walking, and this time the silence felt different, less anxious, more anticipatory. "Tell me something about yourself," he said. "Something that has nothing to do with scandal or society." Elise considered. "I read voraciously. Novels, mostly. The ones with happy endings where virtue is rewarded and villains meet their just fate. Escapism, perhaps. Or perhaps simply a reminder that the world could be different than it is. What are you reading now? A novel about a woman who disguises herself as a man to fight in a war. It is quite thrilling, actually, though my aunt thinks it is highly inappropriate." Anthony's smile was genuine this time. "I suspect your aunt thinks many things are inappropriate. What does she think of me speaking with you?" Ellis glanced over to where Margaret was still examining flowers, but had positioned herself to keep them in her line of sight. "She is torn between euphoria that a duke is paying attention to me and terror that you will break my heart and ruin what little reputation I have left. And you? What do you think?" Ellis met his gaze directly. "I think you are either the kindest man I have ever met or a very skilled actor. I have not yet determined which." "Fair enough." He paused. "Though I will tell you this, Miss Whitmore. I do not play games with people's emotions. If I were not genuinely interested in knowing you, I would not be here." They walked for nearly an hour. Anthony asked about her childhood, her interests, her opinions on everything from literature to politics. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, not simply waiting for his turn to talk. And when he shared his own thoughts, there was none of the condescension she had come to expect from men of his class. When they finally parted ways, promising to meet again the following week at a gallery opening, Ellis felt something she had not felt in weeks. Hope. It was terrifying. That evening, Margaret could barely contain her excitement. A duke. Ellis. The Duke of Thornhill. "Do you understand what this could mean?" "It means one pleasant conversation, Aunt Margaret, nothing more." But her aunt's knowing smile suggested she saw what Ellis herself was afraid to acknowledge, that one conversation had changed something, had shifted the ground beneath her feet. And Anthony Ashford, the most desired duke in England, looked at her as though she mattered, as though she was more than the scandal that had tried to define her. As Elise lay in bed that night, she allowed herself to wonder, to imagine, to hope. It was dangerous, it was foolish. But for the first time since that terrible night at Hartwick Manor, she felt something other than pain. She felt alive. The weeks that followed brought a subtle but unmistakable shift in Ellis's life. Anthony appeared at the gallery opening as promised, spending most of the evening by her side, discussing art and literature with an enthusiasm that surprised her. 3 days later, he invited her and her aunt to a private concert, then a museum exhibition, then a garden party at his mother's estate. Each encounter was carefully orchestrated to remain within the bounds of propriety. Margaret always present as chaperone, conversations conducted in public spaces, no improper touches or declarations. Yet something was building between them, something that manifested in lingering glances across crowded rooms, in the way his hand would brush against hers when helping her into a carriage, in the subtle shift of his body toward hers whenever they stood together, as though drawn by invisible threads. Society noticed. At first the whispers were cautious, skeptical. The Duke was simply being charitable, surely, showing kindness to a woman who had been unjustly maligned. But as his attentions continued, as he appeared at her side with increasing frequency, the whispers changed. Perhaps there was more to Miss Whitmore than they had initially thought. Perhaps the Duke saw something they had missed. Perhaps they had been too hasty in their judgment. Ellis felt the shift like the slow turning of a tide. Women who had cut her at social gatherings now offered tentative smiles. Invitations began arriving at her aunt's home again. Her name appeared in society columns, no longer followed by scandal but by speculation about the Duke's intentions. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. One afternoon, during a walk through the botanical gardens, Anthony broached the subject directly. They had wandered ahead of Margaret, who had strategically discovered a bench that required prolonged examination. "You are being talked about," he said without preamble. "I am always being talked about, Your Grace. The question is whether the talk is cruel or merely curious. It is becoming decidedly favorable." He paused, his grey eyes searching her face. "How does that make you feel?" Ellis considered her answer carefully. "Grateful, suspicious, undeserving." "Undeserving." His tone sharpened. "Why?" "Because I have done nothing to earn their good opinion except stand beside you. My character has not changed. My actions remain the same. Yet suddenly I am worthy of respect simply because a duke finds me tolerable." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Is that what you think? That I find you merely tolerable?" The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "I do not know what to think, Your Grace. I do not understand why you continue to seek my company when you could have anyone, when you could have women far more beautiful, more accomplished, more suitable." Anthony took a step closer. They were still in public view, still technically proper, but something in the air between them felt charged, dangerous. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you, Miss Whitmore?" She could only nod, her voice suddenly trapped in her throat. "I see a woman who bears her pain with dignity, who does not whine or manipulate or seek revenge. I see intelligence in your eyes, genuine kindness in your actions, strength in your silence. I see someone who reads about heroines fighting in wars and wishes the world could be different. I see someone real, Elise, not a performance, not a strategy, just you." He had used her given name. The intimacy of it sent heat flooding through her body. "I am proposing something," he continued. "Not marriage, not yet, but a public alliance, a clear message that you are under my protection, that any insult to you is an insult to me." Ellis's mind raced. "You would tie yourself to my scandal? Risk your reputation for mine? My reputation can weather anything. Yours cannot, not without help." He paused. "I am not doing this out of pity, Ellis. I am doing this because I want to. Because seeing you treated as you deserve to be treated matters to me. And what do you want in return? Your company, your conversation, the chance to know you better without the constant weight of society's judgment pressing down on both of us." A slight smile touched his lips. "And perhaps eventually permission to court you properly." Her heart stuttered. "Court me, when you are ready, when you trust that my intentions are genuine. I am a patient man, Elise. I can wait." She studied his face, searching for deception, for hidden motives. But all she saw was sincerity and something else, something that looked almost like longing. "Why me?" she whispered. "Truly, why me? Because when I am with you, I am not just a title or a fortune or a political alliance. I am simply a man trying to make a woman smile. And that, Miss Whitmore, is more valuable than any dynastic marriage society could arrange." Ellis felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to cry in public, but the emotion in her chest was overwhelming. "I am afraid," she admitted, "of trusting again, of believing that someone could choose me without ulterior motive. Then let me prove it to you." Anthony's voice was gentle but firm. "One day at a time, one conversation at a time. Until you believe what I already know, that you are worthy of far more than you have been given." She took a shaky breath. "Very well, Your Grace. I accept your alliance. Anthony, he corrected softly. When we are in private conversation, please call me Anthony. The use of his given name felt impossibly intimate. Anthony. His smile was transformative, lighting his entire face. Much better. They resumed walking, and Ellis felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she had built so carefully were not crumbling. Not yet. But perhaps, just perhaps, she was beginning to open a door. That evening, when she returned home, Clara was waiting in the drawing room. Ellis stopped short. Her sister looked uncomfortable. Her usual confidence dimmed. "What are you doing here? Father sent me." Clara twisted her hands together to apologize properly. "He says if I do not make amends, he will cut my allowance. So you are here under duress, not genuine remorse." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I am sorry for what happened, Ellis, truly. Are you sorry it happened, or sorry you were caught? Sorry I was hurt, or sorry society judged you for it?" Clara's silence was answer enough. "I thought so." Ellis moved toward the stairs. "You may tell Father you fulfilled your obligation. Consider us reconciled if that makes things easier for everyone." "Ellis, wait." "No." Ellis turned back, her voice steady. "You made your choice, Clara. You chose Thomas over me, over our sisterhood, over any loyalty we might have shared. I am not interested in forgiveness extracted under financial pressure. If you ever genuinely regret what you did, perhaps we can speak then. But not today." She left Clara standing in the drawing room and did not look back. That night Ellis wrote in her journal, a habit she had recently resumed. She wrote about Anthony, about hope, about the terrifying possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be happy again. And for the first time in months, she signed the entry not with pain but with cautious optimism. If this story is touching your heart, if Ellis's journey is resonating with you, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. And tell me, what would you do in Ellis's position? Would you accept the Duke's alliance, or would fear hold you back? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your words mean more than you know, and I read every single one. The transformation was undeniable. Within weeks of Anthony's public alliance with Ellis, invitations flooded her aunt's home. Women who had once whispered behind their fans now sought her company. Men who had ignored her existence now bowed with respect when she passed. But the most significant change was not in society's perception. It was in the growing connection between Ellis and Anthony. They spent nearly every day together now. Walks in the park, visits to bookshops where he bought her novels without asking permission, quiet dinners at his mother's home, the Dowager Duchess watching them with knowing eyes and an approving smile. And with each encounter, the tension between them intensified. It started with small things. The way Anthony's hand would linger at the small of her back when guiding her through a doorway. How his fingers would brush against hers when passing her a book, the touch lasting seconds longer than necessary. The way his eyes would drop to her lips when she spoke, as though he was thinking of something other than her words. Elise felt it too. The awareness of him that made her skin feel too tight, her breath too shallow. The way her pulse would race when he leaned close to point out something in a painting. The heat that spread through her body when he smiled at something she said, genuine pleasure lighting his face. They were playing with fire, and both of them knew it. One evening, Anthony invited her to his private library. Margaret accompanied them, of course, but she had developed a convenient tendency to fall asleep in comfortable chairs, her soft snoring providing a strange sort of permission. The library was magnificent, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a fire crackling in the hearth, deep chairs positioned for reading. Ellis stood in the center of the room, slowly turning to take it all in. "This is extraordinary," she breathed. Anthony watched her, not the books. "I thought you would appreciate it. You may borrow anything you like. Consider it yours as much as mine." The casual intimacy of the offer made her heart flutter. She moved to the nearest shelf, running her fingers along the spines, reading titles in the firelight. She felt rather than heard him move behind her, close, so close she could feel the warmth of his body, smell the sandalwood scent that had become synonymous with safety and desire. Ellis. His voice was low, rough. "May I ask you something?" She turned, finding herself trapped between the bookshelf and his body. He had not touched her, had left space between them, but it felt more intimate than any embrace. Of course. Do you feel it? This thing between us? Her breath caught. She could lie. Should lie. But something about the vulnerability in his eyes demanded honesty. Yes. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers traced the line of her jaw with excruciating gentleness. The touch sent shivers down her spine. I think about you constantly, he admitted, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. When I wake, when I work, when I try to sleep. You have invaded every corner of my mind, and I find I do not want you to leave. Anthony, I want to kiss you. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, their breath mingling. I want to do far more than kiss you, but I will not. Not until you are ready. Not until you trust that this is real. Ellis's hands came up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms, as fast and unsteady as her own. How do you do this to me? She whispered. How do you make me want things I swore I would never want again? Because we are meant for this. His voice was fierce. You and I. This connection. I have never felt it before, Elise. I did not believe it existed outside of novels. I am afraid. I know. His lips brushed her forehead. Not quite a kiss, but close enough to make her tremble. And I will wait as long as you need. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing together, existing in a space that belonged only to them. Then Margaret snorted in her sleep, and the spell broke. Anthony stepped back, his eyes dark with want, but his expression tender. Shall we look at the poetry section? I believe you mentioned an interest in Wordsworth. The next weeks became a study in controlled desire. Every interaction carried weight. Every touch, however innocent, felt charged with meaning. At a garden party, Anthony tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers trailing down her neck in a caress that made her breathing stop. At the theater, sitting in his family's box, his hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining with an intimacy that had nothing to do with the performance on stage. And through it all they talked, about everything. His responsibilities as Duke, her dreams of perhaps writing novels herself one day, his childhood loneliness in a house full of servants but devoid of warmth, her memories of her mother, who had died when she was 12. He made her laugh. She made him think. Together they created a world where scandal and society's expectations faded into irrelevance. One afternoon, during a particularly heated discussion about politics, Anthony suddenly stopped mid-sentence. What? Ellis asked, confused by his expression. You are magnificent when you are passionate about something. Do you know that? Your eyes light up. You gesture with your hands. You forget to be afraid. He moved closer. I want to see you like this always. Anthony. His name came out breathless. You are looking at me as though I am falling in love with you. He finished. Because I am, Elise. I have been for weeks now. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and brave. I do not know if I can love again, she said honestly. I do not know if that part of me survived what happened. Then, let me love you until you remember how. His hand cupped her face. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me show you what it means to be chosen, truly chosen for exactly who you are. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He caught them with his thumbs, his touch infinitely gentle. I am beginning to believe you, she whispered. I am beginning to hope that is enough. He pressed his lips to her forehead, then her temple, then the corner of her eye where tears still clung to her lashes. That is more than enough. That night, Ellis lay awake, her body humming with unfulfilled desire, her heart racing with emotions she had thought dead. She was falling. Perhaps she had been falling since that first moment in the church, when storm-grey eyes had looked at her and seen worth instead of shame. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. And somewhere in the darkness, she knew Anthony lay awake too, thinking of her, wanting her, waiting for her. The question was no longer if she would give him her heart. The question was when she would finally be brave enough to reach for happiness again. And that answer, she realized with equal parts fear and excitement, was coming very soon. The winter ball at Thornhill House was the social event of the season. Every member of high society had received an invitation, and every member had accepted. To decline an invitation from the Duke of Thornhill was unthinkable. Ellis stood in front of the mirror in her aunt's home, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gown Anthony had sent, without asking, simply knowing, was the most beautiful thing she had ever worn. Deep emerald silk that brought out the warmth in her dark hair and eyes, cut in the latest fashion with delicate embroidery along the bodice. She had protested the gift, of course. It was too much, too intimate, too presumptuous. Anthony had simply smiled and said, "Humor me. I want to see you in something that matches how I see you. Extraordinary. You are nervous." Margaret appeared behind her, adjusting the small pearl combs in Ellis's hair. Terrified, Ellis corrected, "Why has he invited me to this ball, Aunt Margaret? What does he intend?" Her aunt's smile was knowing. "I suspect, my dear, that tonight will change your life." The ballroom at Thornhill House took Ellis's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors. Flowers adorned every surface. Musicians played from a raised platform. And everywhere she looked, the cream of English society mingled and danced and gossiped. All eyes turned when she entered on her aunt's arm. She felt their stares, heard the whispers, but this time the attention felt different. Curious rather than cruel. Assessing rather than dismissive. Then she saw Anthony across the room, and everything else faded. He was magnificent in formal evening wear, his dark coat fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders, his cravat tied with precise elegance. But it was not his appearance that made her heart race. It was the way he looked at her, as though she was the only person in the room, as though she was everything. He crossed the ballroom with purposeful strides, ignoring every attempt to intercept him. When he reached her, he bowed deeply. "Miss Whitmore, you are breathtaking, Your Grace." Her voice was breathless. "Thank you for inviting us. The pleasure is entirely mine." He extended his hand. "May I have the honor of the first dance?" She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm through her glove. He led her onto the dance floor as the musicians struck up a waltz. As they began to dance, Elise became aware of the unusual nature of the situation. The host never danced the first dance with anyone but family. It was a statement, a declaration. "You are causing quite a stir," she murmured. "Good." His hand tightened on her waist, pulling her slightly closer than strict propriety allowed. "Let them talk. Let them understand." "Understand what?" "That you are mine, that I am choosing you, that anyone who wishes to continue in my good graces will treat you with the respect you deserve. Anthony, I am going to ask you something tonight, Ellis." His grey eyes held hers with intensity that made her stumble slightly. He steadied her immediately. "Something important. But first I need you to know that regardless of your answer, my regard for you will not change." Her heart pounded so hard, she was certain he could feel it. "What are you going to ask?" "Wait. Trust me. Just a little longer." The dance ended, but Anthony did not release her hand. Instead, he led her through the crowd toward the raised platform where the musicians sat. Conversations died as people noticed. A hush fell over the ballroom. Anthony turned to face the assembled guests, Ellis's hand still held firmly in his. Friends, family, esteemed guests. His voice carried across the sudden silence. "Thank you for joining me tonight. I have gathered you here for more than just a ball. I have something I wish to announce." Ellis's breathing stopped. Surely he was not going to. "Over the past months, I have had the extraordinary privilege of knowing Miss Ellis Whitmore." He looked down at her, his expression tender. "She is intelligent, kind, strong, and genuine. She has challenged me, delighted me, and shown me what it means to see beyond surface to substance." The ballroom was utterly silent. Ellis could feel hundreds of eyes on them. Society has not always been kind to Miss Whitmore. There have been whispers, judgments, cruelties. Anthony's voice hardened slightly. "But I say this clearly and without equivocation. Anyone who speaks ill of her speaks ill of me. Anyone who insults her insults my family. Because it is my intention, with her permission to make her my wife. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Ellis felt tears spring to her eyes. Anthony turned to her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Ellis Whitmore, will you do me the immeasurable honor of becoming my Duchess?" She could not speak, could not breathe, could only stare at him through tears that blurred her vision. "I know you are afraid," he said softly, for her ears only. "I know trust does not come easily. But I am asking you to be brave one more time, to take this leap with me. I promise I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of that trust." "Yes." The word came out choked. "Yes, Anthony. Yes." His smile was radiant. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a brand. The ballroom erupted in applause, but Ellis barely heard it. She was aware only of Anthony, of the joy in his eyes, of the promise that shimmered between them. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Well-wishers surrounded them. Ladies who had cut her weeks ago now embraced her. Men who had ignored her now bowed with respect. The Dowager Duchess kissed her cheek and whispered, "Welcome to the family, my dear. I knew you were perfect for him." But one reaction stood out above all others. Clara appeared through the crowd, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. Thomas trailed behind her, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Ellis." Clara's voice was small. "I had no idea. I did not think that someone would choose me." Ellis kept her voice level, "that I was worthy of being chosen." Clara flinched. "I am happy for you. Truly, are you?" Ellis studied her sister. "Or are you simply realizing what you threw away?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but Ellis felt no satisfaction in causing them, only a strange sort of closure. "I forgive you, Clara, not because you deserve it, not because you have earned it, but because I refuse to carry your betrayal into my future. Anthony has shown me what it means to be truly valued. I will not let your choices diminish that." She turned away, finding Anthony watching from a few feet away. He had given her space to handle this herself, but his presence was a steady reassurance. When she reached him, he took her hand. "Are you well?" "I am more than well." She smiled, and it was genuine. "I am free." Later that night, after the guests had departed and her aunt had fallen asleep in the carriage on the way home, Ellis sat alone in her room, staring at the simple engagement ring Anthony had placed on her finger. Not ostentatious, not meant to impress, just beautiful in its elegant simplicity. She thought about the girl who had fled Hartwick Manor in tears months ago. That girl had believed herself unworthy, replaceable, disposable. But she was not that girl anymore. She was a woman who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. A woman who had learned that her worth was not determined by others' choices. A woman who was about to become a duchess. And most importantly, a woman who was loved. Truly, deeply, completely loved by a man who saw her not as a scandal or a stepping stone, but as herself. Ellis touched the ring gently, feeling its weight, its promise. Tomorrow, her new life would begin. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not afraid. She was ready. The weeks following their engagement passed in a whirlwind of preparations, wedding arrangements, meetings with solicitors, endless fittings for her wedding trousseau. But through it all, Anthony remained constant, patient, attentive, loving in ways both spoken and unspoken. They had agreed to marry quickly. There was no reason to wait, and both of them had grown tired of restraint. The wedding would be elegant but intimate, family and close friends only. No grand spectacle, just the sacred commitment of two souls choosing each other. The night before the wedding, tradition dictated they should sleep apart. But as darkness fell, and Ellis lay in her room at Thornhill House, where she had been staying as a guest for the past week, she found herself unable to settle. Her body hummed with anticipation and nerves. Tomorrow, she would become Anthony's wife. Tomorrow, everything would change. A soft knock at her door made her heart leap. She opened it to find Anthony standing in the hallway, still dressed but with his cravat loosened, his dark hair slightly mussed, as though he had been running his hands through it. "I know I should not be here." His voice was rough, but I could not stay away. "I needed to see you." Ellis glanced down the empty corridor, then stepped back, allowing him entry. The impropriety would have scandalized society, but they were beyond such concerns now. Tomorrow they would be married. Tonight they belonged to each other. Anthony closed the door behind him, leaning against it as though he needed the support. "You look beautiful." She wore only her nightgown and a silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. It was the most undressed he had ever seen her, and she watched his eyes darken with desire. "You should not be here," she whispered, but there was no conviction in the words. "I know." He did not move closer. "I will leave if you ask me to. But Ellis, I need you to know something before tomorrow." "What?" "I love you. Not because you are beautiful, though you are. Not because you are intelligent or kind or any other quality I could list. I love you because you are you. Because when I am with you, I am more myself than I have ever been. Because you make me want to be better, stronger, more worthy of the gift you are giving me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I love you too. I was so afraid to feel this again. But Anthony, I love you so much it terrifies me." He crossed the room in 3 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "Do not be afraid. Not of this. Not of us." Then he kissed her. It was not like the chaste kisses they had shared before, brief touches of lips that left them both aching for more. This was different, deeper. A claiming and a surrender all at once. Ellis's hands came up to grip his shoulders, steadying herself as the world tilted beneath her feet. His mouth moved against hers with practiced skill, but also with tenderness, with reverence, as though she was something precious that might break. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "I want you." His voice was ragged. "I have wanted you for so long. But I will wait until tomorrow if that is what you need." Ellis looked up at him, at the man who had chosen her when no one else would, who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had waited with infinite patience for her heart to heal enough to love again. "We are to be married tomorrow," she said softly. "In the eyes of God and everyone who matters, we are already committed to each other. I do not want to wait anymore, Anthony. I want this. I want you." "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." His kiss this time was less restrained. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her against him. She could feel the hard planes of his body through the thin fabric of her nightgown, could feel the evidence of his desire, and it thrilled her rather than frightened her. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, Anthony loosened the tie of her robe. The silk whispered as it fell to the floor. His hands trembled slightly as they traced the curve of her shoulders, down her arms, learning the shape of her. "You are exquisite," he breathed. Ellis reached up to unbutton his waistcoat, her fingers fumbling slightly with nerves and anticipation. He helped her, shrugging out of the garment, then his shirt, revealing the muscled chest she had only imagined. She placed her palms against his skin, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. They were both trembling now, caught between desire and the weight of what they were about to share. Anthony guided her backward toward the bed, never breaking their kiss. When her legs hit the mattress, she sat, and he knelt before her, his hands gently pushing the hem of her nightgown up, exposing her legs inch by inch. His lips followed the path his hands traced, soft kisses along her calf, her knee, the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. Ellis gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "At any moment, for any reason, do not stop." Her voice was breathless. "Please, Anthony, do not stop." He rose, helping her slip the nightgown over her head, leaving her bare before him. For a moment, she felt vulnerable, exposed, but the look in his eyes, pure adoration mixed with unmistakable hunger, banished any self-consciousness. "You are perfect." He traced the line of her collarbone with one finger, down between her breasts across her stomach. "Every part of you is perfect." Then he was joining her on the bed, his remaining clothes discarded, his body covering hers with careful weight. They took their time exploring each other, learning what brought pleasure, what made breath catch and muscles tense with anticipation. His hands were everywhere, gentle but sure, awakening sensations she had never experienced. His mouth followed, kissing and tasting, murmuring words of love and desire against her heated skin. When he finally positioned himself above her, his eyes met hers in the candlelight. "I love you, Ellis. Now and always. Now and always," she echoed. He entered her slowly, carefully, mindful of her inexperience. There was a moment of discomfort that made her tense, but he stilled immediately, kissing her temple, her cheek, her lips, giving her time to adjust. "Breathe," he whispered. "I have you. I will always have you." The discomfort faded, replaced by a fullness that felt right, natural, as though their bodies had been designed for precisely this joining. They moved together, finding a rhythm that was both urgent and tender. Ellis wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting more of this connection, more of him. Anthony's control was impressive, but she could see the effort it cost him, could feel the tension in his muscles as he held back, determined to bring her pleasure before seeking his own. And then something inside her began to build, a pressure, a heat, a tightening that spread from where their bodies joined to every nerve ending. Her breathing became ragged, her nails digging into his shoulders as she chased something she could not name, but desperately needed. "Let go," Anthony breathed against her ear. "I have you. Let go, my love." She shattered. Wave after wave of sensation crashed through her, stealing her breath, making her cry out his name. Somewhere in the midst of her release, she felt him follow, heard him groan her name as he found his own completion. They lay tangled together afterward, heart still racing, skin damp with exertion. Anthony rolled to his side, pulling her against his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Ellis tilted her head to look at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath the question. "None. This was perfect. You are perfect." His smile was tender. "We are perfect. Together." She nestled closer, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Tomorrow they would speak vows before witnesses, but tonight in the quiet darkness of her room they had already made their commitment, body and soul, heart and mind. This was what love was meant to be, not a transaction, not a convenience, but a choice made freely, celebrated completely, and honored absolutely. As sleep began to claim her, Ellis realized that the girl who had fled Hartwick Manor in devastation felt like a stranger now. That girl had believed herself broken beyond repair. But she had been wrong. She had not been broken. She had been transforming, becoming someone stronger, braver, more capable of recognizing true love when it finally appeared. Anthony pressed a kiss to her hair, his arms tightening around her. "Sleep, my love. Tomorrow we begin our life together." "Tomorrow," she agreed drowsily, but tonight was already perfect. And wrapped in his embrace, loved and cherished and complete, Ellis Whitmore fell asleep for the last time as a single woman. When she woke, she would be a duchess, but more importantly, she would be his, and he would be hers, forever. The wedding ceremony was everything Ellis had never dared to dream. Held in the private chapel at Thornhill House, with sunlight streaming through stained glass windows and the scent of roses filling the air, it was intimate and sacred. Anthony's eyes never left her face as she walked down the aisle, and when he took her hand, his grip was steady and sure. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the weight behind them was anything but ordinary. When Anthony promised to honor and cherish her, Ellis heard the deeper promise beneath, that he would never betray her, never diminish her, never make her feel less than treasured. And when she promised to love and support him, she meant it with every fiber of her being. The kiss that sealed their union was chaste, appropriate for the sacred setting, but it carried the memory of the night before. A secret they shared, a promise fulfilled and renewed. As the Duchess of Thornhill, Ellis's life transformed in ways both expected and surprising. She had anticipated the social elevation, the respect that came with the title, the invitations that now flooded in from every corner of society. What she had not anticipated was how natural it would feel, how right. Anthony's mother, the Dowager Duchess, took her under her wing immediately. She taught Ellis the intricacies of managing a ducal household, the politics of high society, the delicate balance of power and grace required of a woman in her position. But more than that, she offered something Ellis had been missing since her own mother's death: maternal love and guidance. "You are exactly what he needed," the Dowager said one afternoon over tea. "Someone real, someone who sees him as a man, not just a title. I have watched him with you, my dear. He is happy, truly happy. That is worth more than any advantageous alliance could ever be." The words warmed Ellis more than she could express, but there was one matter that remained unresolved, one relationship that needed closure before she could fully embrace her new life. Clara. 3 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived. Ellis recognized the handwriting immediately, though it was less elaborate than usual, the flourishes subdued. "Dearest Ellis, I hope this letter finds you well and happy in your new life. I have heard such wonderful things about your marriage, and I am genuinely pleased for you. I am writing to ask if you might be willing to see me. I know I do not deserve your time or attention, but I need to speak with you, not because Father demands it, not because society expects it, but because I cannot live with myself if I do not at least try to make amends properly. If you refuse, I will understand. But please know that I am sorry, truly, deeply sorry for what I did to you." Your sister, Clara Ellis, read the letter 3 times, each reading bringing different emotions to the surface: anger, hurt, but also, surprisingly, a willingness to listen, not because she owed Clara anything, but because holding on to bitterness would only poison her own happiness. She showed the letter to Anthony that evening as they sat together in their private sitting room, his arm around her shoulders, a book forgotten on his lap. "What do you think I should do?" Anthony was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently stroking her arm. "That depends. Do you want to see her?" "I think I do. Not to forgive her easily or to restore what we had, but to close that chapter properly, to show her, and myself, that I have moved beyond what she did. Then see her." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But know that I will be nearby if you need me. You do not have to face this alone." The meeting was arranged for the following week at Thornhill House. Ellis chose the morning room, neutral territory, elegant but not ostentatious. She wanted Clara to understand that this was not about displaying her new wealth and position, but about honest conversation. When Clara arrived, Ellis was struck by how diminished she appeared. Her sister had always carried herself with vivacious confidence, drawing eyes wherever she went, but now she seemed smaller somehow, uncertain. "Thank you for seeing me." Clara's voice was barely above a whisper as she entered the room. Ellis gestured to the chair opposite hers. "Please, sit." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Finally, Clara spoke. "I do not know where to begin. The beginning is usually best." Ellis kept her voice level, neither warm nor cold. "When did it start? Your relationship with Thomas?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "The summer before your engagement was announced. We met at a garden party. He was charming, attentive. I knew it was wrong, but I convinced myself it was harmless flirtation. Then it became more. And when Father arranged my engagement to him, I should have stopped it." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I should have told you immediately, but Thomas said we could wait it out, that once the marriage was secure and the financial arrangement complete, we could be together openly. I was selfish, Elise. I wanted him, and I did not care what it cost you. At least you are being honest now. I have had a great deal of time to think." Clara wiped at her eyes. "After you left, after the scandal broke, Thomas, he changed. Or perhaps I simply saw him clearly for the first time. He was angry that the plan had failed, angry that he had lost your dowry. He blamed me for being careless, for allowing you to discover us." Ellis felt a pang of bitter satisfaction. "So your great love was conditional after all. Father forbade him from seeing me for months. When he finally relented, Thomas proposed." Clara's laugh was hollow. "I should have been happy. It was everything I thought I wanted. But Elise, standing there with him, imagining our future together, all I could feel was emptiness. What happened? I realized that what I felt for him was not love. It was infatuation, selfishness, the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. Clara met Ellis's eyes directly. And in pursuing that, I destroyed the one relationship that truly mattered, the one with my sister. Ellis took a slow breath. You hurt me more deeply than Thomas ever could. His betrayal was painful, but yours. Clara, you were my sister. I trusted you completely. I know, and I am so sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even know if I deserve to ask. But I needed you to know that I understand now, that I see what I did, that I regret it with every part of my being. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt different, less hostile, more honest. I broke the engagement with Thomas, Clara said quietly, 2 weeks ago. Father was furious, but I could not marry him. Not when I knew the foundation of our relationship was built on betrayal and selfishness. Ellis felt surprise register on her face. You refused him? I did. Clara's smile was sad. I finally chose to do the right thing, even though it came far too late to matter. Ellis considered her sister, this woman who had wounded her so deeply yet who now sat before her, humbled and genuinely remorseful. She thought about the bitterness she could hold on to, the punishment she could inflict with coldness and rejection. Then she thought about Anthony, about the love that had healed her, about the happiness she had found in letting go of old pain. I cannot give you what we had before, Ellis said finally. That trust, that closeness, you broke it, and I do not know if it can be fully repaired. Clara nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I understand. But, Ellis held up a hand. I will not carry hatred for you into my new life. I will not let what you did define who I become. So I am choosing to forgive you, Clara. Not because you have earned it, but because holding on to this anger only hurts me. Clara sobbed openly now. Thank you. Thank you, Ellis. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am so grateful for it. Ellis stood, and Clara rose as well. They looked at each other across the small distance that separated them, a distance that represented so much more than physical space. We may never be as we were, Ellis said gently, but perhaps in time we can find a new way to be sisters, a more honest way. I would like that. Clara's voice was choked with emotion. And Ellis? I truly am happy for you. The Duke, Anthony, he looks at you the way every woman dreams of being looked at. You deserve that happiness. After Clara left, Ellis stood at the window, watching the carriage carry her sister away. She felt lighter somehow, as though she had been carrying a weight she had not fully acknowledged until it was lifted. Anthony appeared in the doorway. How do you feel? She turned to him, this man who had given her so much. Free. I feel free. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. I am proud of you. What you did today took more strength than most people possess. She learned it from you. Elise looked up at him. You taught me that healing is possible. That forgiveness does not mean condoning what was done, but choosing not to let it poison your future. His kiss was tender. We heal each other then. That is what love should be. And in his embrace, Ellis knew he was right. She had forgiven Clara, not for her sister's sake, but for her own. She had released the bitterness that had threatened to take root in her heart. Now, finally, she could move forward completely, not as the girl who had been betrayed, but as the woman who had survived, healed, and learned to love again. The past would always be part of her story, but it would not be the ending. That was still being written, and it was more beautiful than she had ever dared to imagine. 3 years had passed since that fateful night at Hartwick Manor. 3 years that had transformed Ellis Whitmore from a broken young woman fleeing betrayal into the Duchess of Thornhill, confident, respected, and deeply loved. The changes were not merely external, though those were evident enough. She moved through society with grace and authority now, her opinions sought on matters ranging from charitable endeavors to political discussions. She had become a patron of several causes dear to her heart, particularly those supporting young women in difficult circumstances. Her intelligence and compassion had earned her genuine respect, not the hollow deference paid to a title. But the most significant changes were internal. The wounds that had seemed so devastatingly permanent had healed, leaving scars that no longer ached but served as reminders of how far she had traveled. And through it all, Anthony remained her constant, her partner, her love. Their marriage had deepened with time, the initial passion evolving into something richer and more complex. They had learned each other's rhythms, moods, and needs. They had weathered disagreements and challenges together, emerging stronger each time. They had built a life based on mutual respect, honest communication, and unwavering commitment. One autumn evening, as golden light painted the drawing room in warm hues, Ellis sat reading while Anthony worked at his desk nearby. It was a scene that had repeated countless times over their marriage, comfortable, companionable silence, broken only by the scratch of his pen and the rustle of her turning pages. She looked up from her book, studying him when he was unaware. The way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration, the elegant strength of his hands, the slight grey beginning to thread through his dark hair at his temples. He glanced up suddenly, catching her watching him. His smile was immediate and warm. "What are you thinking about so intently, my love?" "That I am happy, truly, deeply happy, and that I never thought I would be able to say that again." Anthony set down his pen and crossed to where she sat, settling beside her and pulling her close. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Ellis. And I intend to spend the rest of my life ensuring you have it." She leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar sandalwood scent that still made her heart flutter. "Do you remember the night we met? At that charity event?" "How could I forget? I took one look at you carrying white roses and knew my carefully ordered life was about to be completely disrupted. Were you frightened?" "Terrified." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I had spent so long avoiding emotional entanglements, convincing myself that logic and duty were sufficient for a good life. Then you appeared, and suddenly everything I thought I knew seemed hollow. I was so certain I would never trust anyone again. And now I know that trust is not about never being hurt. It is about finding someone worth the risk of being hurt, someone who proves day after day that they will guard your heart as carefully as their own." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. The butler entered with an envelope on a silver tray. "Your Grace, this arrived by special messenger. It is marked urgent." Anthony took the letter, his expression growing curious as he examined the seal. "It is from Lord Ashworth." He opened it and read quickly, his eyebrows rising. "What is it?" Ellis asked. "He is hosting a grand ball at Hartwick Manor to celebrate the restoration of the estate following extensive renovations. We are invited as guests of honor." Ellis felt her breath catch. Hartwick Manor, the place where her old life had ended, where she had witnessed the betrayal that had shattered her world. She had not returned since that night. "Do you want to go?" Anthony's voice was gentle, giving her the choice without pressure. Ellis considered. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep that place firmly in her past. But another part, the part that had grown stronger over these 3 years, wanted to face it. To return not as the devastated girl who had fled, but as the woman she had become. "Yes." Her voice was steady. "Yes, I want to go. Are you certain?" "We can decline. No one would question it. I am certain." She met his eyes. "I think I need to do this, to close that chapter completely. Then we shall go together." He squeezed her hand. "And if at any moment you wish to leave, we leave. No explanations necessary." The night of the ball arrived crisp and clear. As their carriage approached Hartwick Manor, Ellis felt her pulse quicken. The estate looked different in the darkness, lit by hundreds of lanterns that made it seem almost magical. So different from that night 3 years ago when she had walked these grounds in anguish. Anthony sensed her tension. His hand found hers, steady and reassuring. "I am here, right beside you." She squeezed his fingers gratefully. "I know. And that makes all the difference." The ballroom where so much had changed was transformed. New wallpaper, updated chandeliers, polished floors that gleamed in the light. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely different from her memories. Yet the doorway was the same. The corridor where she had walked searching for Clara. The door behind which she had witnessed her world shattering. They mingled with other guests, Anthony never leaving her side. Several people approached to pay their respects to the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill. Ellis responded graciously, her composure perfect. Then she saw Clara across the room. Her sister had aged too, though she remained beautiful. But there was something different in her bearing now. Less vivacious confidence, more quiet maturity. She was speaking with a gentleman Ellis did not recognize, smiling at something he said, but the smile did not reach her eyes. Their gazes met across the crowded ballroom. Clara's expression shifted, surprise, nervousness, and something that might have been hope. Slowly, Clara excused herself from her companion and made her way through the crowd. When she reached Elise and Anthony, she curtsied deeply. "Your Graces, thank you for coming. Miss Whitmore." Ellis kept her voice neutral but not cold. "The estate looks beautiful. The renovations were well done." "Thank you." Clara hesitated. "Ellis, might I have a word? Privately." Ellis glanced at Anthony, who gave a slight nod. They stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near the windows. "I was not certain you would come," Clara said quietly. "To this place, after everything, I almost did not. But I realized that running from memories gives them more power than they deserve." Clara nodded slowly. "I have thought about that night so often, about the pain I caused, about how differently things could have been if I had made better choices. We cannot change the past, Clara. We can only choose how we move forward from it. I know, and I want you to know that I have been trying to be better, to make amends where I can. I have been volunteering at a charity for young women, trying to help others avoid the mistakes I made." Elise studied her sister, seeing genuine change in her eyes. "That is good, Clara, truly. I will never stop regretting what I did to you. But seeing you now, seeing how happy you are, seeing how you have not just survived but flourished." Clara's voice caught. "It gives me hope that perhaps good can come from even the worst mistakes. You broke my trust," Ellis said gently. "But you also, inadvertently, gave me the push I needed to find something real. If my engagement to Thomas had proceeded, I would never have met Anthony. I would never have known what true love feels like. Do you think we can ever truly be sisters again?" Ellis considered carefully. "I think we can be something. Perhaps not what we were, but something new. Something built on honesty rather than assumption, on respect rather than obligation." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I would like that. Very much." They returned to the ballroom together, and Ellis felt another piece of old pain release its hold on her heart. As the evening progressed, Anthony led her onto the dance floor. They moved together with the easy grace of long practice, their bodies knowing each other's rhythms instinctively. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Lighter." She smiled up at him. "Being here, facing this place, seeing Clara, it has shown me how far I have come, how much I have healed. You have always been strong, Elise. You just needed to remember it." "No." She shook her head. "I needed someone to show me what I was capable of. You did that, Anthony. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I thought I was worthless. You loved me when I believed I was unlovable. And I will continue to do all of those things every day for the rest of our lives." He pulled her slightly closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are my heart, Elise. My home. Everything I am, everything I have, belongs to you." Tears pricked her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you. So much it sometimes overwhelms me. Then let it overwhelm you. Let it fill every part of you, because that is what you do to me every single day." As they danced, Ellis caught sight of their reflection in one of the gilded mirrors lining the ballroom wall. She saw a confident woman in an elegant gown, dancing with a man who looked at her as though she hung the moon. She saw the Duchess of Thornhill, respected and admired. But more than that, she saw herself. Whole, healed, happy. The music swelled, and Anthony spun her in a graceful turn. When she completed the rotation, her eyes found the doorway where 3 years ago her world had ended. Now, standing in that same space, dancing with the man she loved, she realized something profound. That night had not been an ending after all. It had been a beginning. the beginning of her journey to finding herself, to understanding her worth, to discovering what real love looked like. The betrayal had broken her, yes, but in the breaking, she had been remade, stronger, wiser, more capable of recognizing and accepting genuine love when it appeared. As the dance ended and Anthony escorted her from the floor, Ellis took one last look around Hartwick Manor, the place that had witnessed her devastation, the place that tonight witnessed her triumph. She would not need to return again. This chapter was truly closed now. Her future was waiting, bright and beautiful and filled with love. And hand in hand with Anthony, she walked into it without hesitation or fear. Sometimes the most profound transformations come not from triumph but from tragedy. Ellis Whitmore learned that the night her world shattered in betrayal, but she also learned that endings are often beginnings in disguise, that the heart, once broken, can heal stronger than before. That true love does not seek to rescue, but to walk alongside. That forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but about refusing to let it define the future. And perhaps most importantly, that our worth is not determined by others' choices, but by our own courage to keep moving forward. What would you have done in Ellis's place? Would you have found the strength to trust again, to forgive, to choose hope over bitterness? If this story touched your heart, if Ellis and Anthony's journey moved you, I would be so grateful if you would leave a like on this video. Your support means the world and helps me continue creating these stories. Please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new tale of love, healing, and second chances. And I would love to know, where in the world are you listening to this story right now? Share in the comments below. Whether you are in New York or New Delhi, Sao Paulo or Sydney, know that this story was told for you. Thank you for spending this time with me, and may your own story be filled with the courage to heal and the wisdom to recognize true love when it finds you.